Okay, we'll open up the Facilities Committee meeting, and we'll start with Buildings and Grounds, and we'll ask for a motion to pass the minutes of the last meeting by Matt. We need a second by John. Any questions, changes, deletions? Call the question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Okay, Frank, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item is the lease renewal for D&G Recycling. The lease runs out in October 9th, so I didn't know if the committee had a chance to review, or I did talk to Mr. Swan, and the payments are being made on time, and the past due is also being taken care of. So.
I'll say. So he's up to snuff on the agreement that we've set out?
I believe so.
Well,
Go ahead, Mike.
Chairman, he's made 18 months of extra payments of $1,000 a month. So he's got 2 more payments to make, and he will be up to snuff on the 20 grand on the rent. He's also paid in full 1 year's worth of gas bills that weren't paid, so those are all caught up. The only thing left after that will be the interest and penalty, which will be taken care of with 1 more extra payment. So he's basically got 3 more months, and he'll be done.
Okay, but you're happy with the performance of the paybacks?
Ever since we talked to him and he started paying, he's been perfect. He hasn't missed a beat.
Okay.
So,
And then the only other thing, Frank, we had was, the maintenance and condition of the property. Are you happy with the, where it's at?
I believe there's been a lot of improvement there. I think there's some more that could be done, but
Okay.
he has been working at cleaning the outside up.
And do you have a schedule? Are you keeping after him to get it to, what the standards we expect of him?
Yeah, I know there was mention of putting something in the lease in that regard. I don't know exactly the language, but...
And Brian, is that something we could
We could do that.
look into? Ron?
Pat and I did tour the place. It is a little bit better, and also I think, Frank, we're planning to put the fencing up so that Brian LaFleur can put his equipment in there. Is that moving along pretty well too?
We've done the concrete work around the piers to shore up the piers where they've shifted. Our next step is to power wash inside and hang a large welding curtain so that our welder from Warrensburg can get in there and start doing the clips around the outside. We've run the wire, the conduit for the wire around the perimeter, and so yeah, it started, and the next big step will be the welding.
We probably will have those trailers undercovered for the winter.
Would you agree?
I would anticipate that would be the case. It is kind of slow, tedious work with the setup required, and Mr. Finger, the manager of D&G, has been, flexible with us, and we've talked to him about the fact that he's going to have to move some material away from the walls so that we can do that, because we're working in the leased area, not just in the end of the building that OES will be.
Right.
So he's been flexible with us on that, and we're just trying to get everything set up. Actually, we'll be meeting out on site to do a final review of our safety procedures and everything with the welding inside.
Rachel?
Thanks for bringing it up before the lease is up in October. That's great, but I don't see an attached copy of the lease. Is there one to have one sent out to the committee?
We can do that.
I can certainly send one, yeah.
And then we would obviously go in this then at the full board, so we'd have time to review that. Is that correct, or does it not require full board approval? I would think it does.
I think it will need a board approval.
Right, it will.
And if
We've already gone through the original lease arrangement with the extensions, the allowable extensions, so we're at the end of that extension phase. So now I think we need a fresh board resolution, which also gives us the opportunity to modify the lease.
Right.
And then the other thing that we need to decide on is the final term, I think, of the lease, whether, I think the prior one was it 3 or 5?
It was 3 and a 4-year extension period.
So
So is this something then that we could get a copy of it, review it, come back with suggestions, and work on this next month? Or you don't have that kind of time?
Well, yeah, we should review, if we come back next month, it's probably going to be after next month's meeting, which would be in September. and then the lease would be up October 9th, so, you know, we would be passing it.
My concern
Like,
just is
yeah.
obviously what Mike shared. I think it's great he's up to speed now. That's fantastic. But you're looking at renewing a lease that where the history has been questionable, and that, hearing from Ron that the actual taking care of the property and all the concerns that we've been talking about for several months, if that's not, and if you're going to be changing up the terms.
Yeah, we should, maybe we can get some of that stuff discussed here and get it a little tighter so that Brian could move forward with it, and then we could have an item 4 review. But what's your suggestion to get it to?
I don't know that it's the organic terms of the lease that are issue. I think the things that from what I've heard that happened were not necessarily in keeping with the terms of the lease, but now he's cured them, so I think it's more a matter of management and making sure that he adheres to those same terms of the lease. I don't know that the lease itself needs to be structured a lot differently. Just,
Okay.
you know, he's shown that he had a bump and he's overcome it at this point, so.
Ron?
Overall, I mean, the 2 times that we visited, the concerns that we had is there's 3 or 4 junk cars there. I shouldn't say junk there. It looks like he's collecting vans. There were 3 or 4 of them. They were still there. So that isn't part of the lease. The other thing was that there appeared to be, the first time we visited, was a lot of not 50-gallon drums, but 25 or 10-gallon containers that had some kind of liquid in them, and there was a little bit of concern about what's that, what's in it. But they were around too. They were metal containers. So, I think we can stiffen it up, and that, what he's entitled to is the building. I don't think he's entitled to the area around the building for storage of his recyclables. If that's the case, we really need to look at that.
And I'm just trying to get the discussion further along so that when we meet, even if we meet next month at this meeting, that at least we have some check-offs that we're satisfied with. So we want to put a provision in that the maintenance gets kept up to standards, some sort of standards, similar to what Ron just discussed, and it doesn't get to the condition that it did.
I think in the lease now, there's language that says he can use that loading dock area or loading ramp area to the right of the building as you pull in. And he can store metal there for, I think there's a day limit on it, like 5 days, but it's kind of spread out from there around the building. He has cleaned a lot of it up. A lot of the stuff he had on the side is gone now. So.
And is there a change in access that he had previously that he was entitled to, and that possibly we would be denying because we're taking over part of the square footage of the building for Brian?
I don't believe so.
So that doesn't come into play. Okay.
He still has one of the large overhead doors to back his paper trailers in.
Okay. Go ahead.
Has anybody expressed an interest other than this gentleman in leasing the property? Is it known that it's for lease, or is it just this gentleman? Has anybody ever come to the county asking to lease the property?
No.
I mean, the history of it is when Perkins left, we did advertise or whatever, and we didn't have a lot of options, and he filled the void. But I think considerably less than what Perkins was renting it for, but at least it put somebody in the building, and he has. And he did hit a financial bump in the road when the metals and whatnot, whatever he was recycling, went way down, and he couldn't get the revenues that he had been sourcing for over the years. But he seems to have recovered from that. So, suggestions, Brian, to move it forward so that the document should probably go, we should get the document out to the committee for review. And do you want it to come back to the next meeting, or?
I guess it would have to. I'll send the current lease, and I'll work with Jeff and Frank and get a proposed new one and email it out to the committee, and they can have a chance to look at it before the next meeting.
And then if anyone has questions or concerns or ideas, you could send them to Brian, and then we would be ready to discuss them and then get a final document so that we could act on it. Probably not till the October meeting, though, correct?
Yeah, the way I guess that would play out that way, but I'm wondering if we could do a short extension memo like you would with any other lease when it expires. You just go to like a month-to-month.
Yeah, same terms on a month-to-month until a new one is executed.
But we would have to do that at this meeting to make it for September's. So you want to make a motion to extend it through October to November 9th, while we finalize. Motion by Ron, seconded by Matt. Any other discussion? Is that okay with everybody? Okay, hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Okay.
The court project update is, we're going along fine out there. The framing is complete except for the north side of the main entrance. That'll be the last thing that gets done. The Sally Port has started, so if you see poles sticking up in the air out there, that's the framing for the fencing on the Sally Port. They're concentrating now on one of the courtrooms because they're going to do a mock-up wall in one of the courtrooms with the actual finished material on the wall. So anyone that would like to see that, if you want to get a hold of me, we can arrange a tour over there. It probably won't be done for a couple of weeks. Mechanical room is sheetrock. They'll be starting in that next week, installing all the boilers and mechanics. The curbs are done outside, the sidewalks are formed, and the back lot they ripped up this past Saturday. That probably won't be paved until October or so, but they wanted to get it done, the material removed. That's about it. If anybody has any questions?
Ron?
Did the $25,000 check go to National Grid so that we can get that pole put in? The extra power to come in, National Grid said they would do that, but they won't do it until they get the check in hand, and it was a $25,000 check, so I don't know where we stand on that.
That's been followed up with, and they're in line. Either they've provided the service or they're scheduled to provide the service. That's been taken care of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's, go ahead.
Wednesday, Kevin and I are going to take a tour of the facility. If there's anyone else that would like to, let me know, and I'll tell you what time. I'm just not sure. Tomorrow at the construction meeting, I'll have a definite time.
Okay. And as far as everything's going on your end of it with what you're checking out, everything's good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Minimal change orders, and we haven't exceeded the budget on the change orders.
Okay. Any questions for Ron or Frank on any of the issues going on at the expansion? Okay. Mark?
Public speak?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, sir. I just had a question about the project cost, where we're at with that, and I believe there's 2 bonds that will be taken out. Do we have an update on the total cost of the project, principal and interest? I heard something about a possible match for part of the interest from New York State. If that was true, I'd like to get an update on that. And then what the total annual payments are projected out to be. If someone can give a quick update on the numbers, I'd appreciate it.
Mike, can you handle some of those?
The total bond that we got was $16.5 million, which was authorized by the board. That was done in 2 bonds. The money is here on hand and is being spent. We did just receive notice last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, that we will be getting a rebate for 25% of the interest that we pay from the court system. And I don't have off the top of my head exactly how much our annual payment would be on this, but it's a little over $1 million.
That's with the 25%.
That does not
Okay, any other questions or comments? Rachel?
I don't know if this is appropriate time. Mine's on anything else to come before the board, so if you want me to wait for after the court.
Just as long as the court's questions or no one else has anything else? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Peter.
Mr. Swan, Mike, the 25% rebate, just to kind of explain that a little bit. Is that a rebate for interest over the total amount of the bond? Is that
It's an interest. What they do is when we submit how much interest we pay annually, they give us a rebate on that 25%.
for the annual, for the entire length of the bond.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're gonna pay about $4 million in interest, so we're basically gonna get
Less than that.
a little less than $4 million in interest, but we're basically gonna get a little less than $1 million from the state on that little less than $4 million. Is that correct? That's
Yeah.
25%.
Yeah,
Okay.
the figures on that, but yes, the
Okay.
principle you're talking about is correct, yes.
Okay, anything else on the courts? Okay, hearing none, Rachel, go ahead.
Thank you. I had an opportunity to meet with the Wellness Committee. I brought this up briefly at the full board meeting, but I have had the chance to talk with Frank Thomas, who's our budget officer, and he suggested I speak with you, Frank, about the possibility of showers in the municipal center and in the human service building. That of course, we've had a lot of discussions about self-insurance and a healthy initiative. We have many employees that walk during breaks. They bike to work. They are out on their lunchtime, and Warrensburg does in fact have a shower. I'm told that they use that quite a bit. It's been very effective for the up north employees, but here we don't have that. And so I wondered, especially since we're in budget season, if there's a way to get a quote on what it would cost not to build brand new plumbing, but to come off of an existing bathroom in the municipal center and the social services building. This is something that we have had some issues at HR about, and we continue to hear from employees that while we're encouraging all this healthy behavior, which is excellent, and exercise, we do need to keep in mind that perhaps providing a shower in both facilities like we have in Warrensburg as well would be helpful. So is that something possibly we could add to the agenda?
You want to comment on it, Frank?
I think we probably have showers in the municipal center that could be utilized. The HSB building might be a problem. I'd have to look at it and see if we could split a bathroom somehow or whatever, but I think it's doable. I don't know how many showers we're talking about, but just okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeff?
I think one of the concerns would be in the HSB would be, the building was designed and constructed to code regarding the number of bathroom facilities for the anticipated number of employees. So I think we're going to run into problems with codes if we eliminate some toilets or some urinals in order to add a shower. I think we instantly bump heads with codes unless we expand the bathrooms into other areas, which, frankly, they're surrounded by hallways and offices. So I think it's going to be tough in the HSB. There are, as Frank mentioned, I think in the near term, I know there's showers over in the Buildings and Grounds shop, and I think there's a shower in one of the bathrooms by Public Health, if I remember right. But I think there's an immediate availability. I know for a fact over in Buildings and Grounds, there's showers there.
We have an entire locker room down in the basement. It used to be the female locker room for the jail.
Right. Okay.
Can you, give us a report next meeting on, what our options are and what we have available and the execution of it?
Sure.
Ron?
I guess my question is are we allowing half-hour lunch hours? Is that what people get?
They get 2 15-minute breaks and a half-hour lunch, but it's...
Half-hour
I
lunch.
think some
So
departments combine.
if you're going to walk around for 15 minutes and then try and shower in 15, which seems like a short time period where you could actually shower if you're exercising. I don't know.
Rachel?
Well, I don't want to get into a discussion about how long it takes someone to shower, if they use comp time or if they're, combining breaks. I want to really convey what we heard at a wellness committee, that showers have been on issue, especially surveys that have gone out previously that they're getting ready to send again. It seems like a very reasonable request. They also asked about being able to put some trail signs as they start to work on a little loop in the back, and I know they're going to come as a wellness committee under personnel later this month, but this specific one was regarding the showers, and it was appropriate for this committee. So maybe if we could just look into it and...
Sure.
That would be
And
great.
report back next meeting. Is that good for everybody?
I did take a tour with the wellness committee and look at trails, possible trails. So we did talk about that a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. And go ahead.
The next item on the agenda was an update on the town of Warrensburg Horicon Avenue sewer extension. The last time we talked in committee was a couple months ago when committee authorized and the board authorized funding, some county funding of $300,000 for the project, with the intent that the project was proceeding this summer. After that last committee and authorization for the funding, the town's engineer had received bids and then recommended that the project seek an extension because of the lead time for materials to complete the project. Wouldn't allow materials to be received and the project to be completed before the end of the year when the current grant expires. So I just want to give the committee an update that that's occurred, so there wasn't a misunderstanding that the project was going to proceed this year. It looks like the extension has been submitted for an extension apparently, and I haven't heard if the extension has been received or what the timeline is to even get an answer on that. But right now the project is in limbo until an extension is granted.
Any questions? Okay. Anything else, Frank? Anything else from the public or anybody else got questions or comments for Frank? Steps down. Okay. Moving to the airport.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two action items on the agenda that go together. We have a resolution request to increase the capital project H325 and to amend the grant for H325. This is to cover the real estate closing costs that exceeded the anticipated grant amount when the project was initiated, when we applied for the grant. The total dollar amount involved is $9,974, with a state and local share of $499 each.
Okay, motion to get it on the floor. Motion by John, seconded by Ron. Discussion. Doug?
This is just another example of costs keep adding, and whenever we say, well, it's going to cost this much, we're 9 out of 10 times incorrect. And it goes up and up and up, just like the Macri situation with the land right now. Can you get that, Ron? Thank you. It's another example of costs going up, and and I was mentioning Macri, and I know he hasn't accepted what we've offered for that small piece of land on the extension of the runway, and these are things that always get thrown in at the last minute. And oh, by the way, the cost went up, and this, we got to add this, we got to add that, and it just gets very frustrating. And I'd like to see us actually hit a number once in a while, but I think sometimes it's almost a premeditated course of action to lowball the heck out of something, and then, oh, you got to add this and that down the road. So this is just one more example of 10 grand, but so I'll be voting against it.
Any other comments, questions? Craig?
Mostly legal costs.
Yeah, legal costs, additional taxes, things like that. Yep. Real estate closing costs that were all determined during the closing process.
Mr. Chairman.
Be a lot over.
Brian?
What was the original?
I'm sorry, Craig.
Supervisor, a big part of that was title insurance. Title insurance for the parcel had not been figured into the closing costs prior to that, and I made the determination that if we were buying that kind of land for that kind of money, we should have title insurance, so that was part of the expense.
Any other questions? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Net opposed.
So moved.
Okay, that's all the action items for committee this month. Under information for discussion and review, the county has received a request from Skimmerhorn Aviation to amend the lease for the new office building and change the structure from a single-story building to a two-story building. They are indicating there will not be any changes to the building foundation, the footprint of the building, or the location or the leased premises. Mr. Lapper is...
John, do you want to give a little...
Hi, everyone. Steve Abbott is here as well. So the foundation is in, the lease is all signed. And Rich has been approached, and whether or not this materializes into a lease, he just thinks it's a smart move at this point, since it won't change the foundation to build a second story. So we've been talking to Ross that this will be 6 feet less than the hangar next door, and we have a letter from county's engineering consultant that that wouldn't be an FAA issue since it's lower than the hangar. So it just seems a smart move at this point to make the additional investment and go to the second story. I don't think it needs a lease amendment because it's a ground lease, it's a footprint lease, and what the lease requires is that the actual design we have to submit to Ross. So I sent a memo last week to Brian and to Ross to take a look at, but obviously procedurally, however, the county wants to handle this fine.
Brian, you want to comment?
I don't think I concur with John that we don't necessarily need to amend the lease, but we both did agree that it would be certainly appropriate to let the committee know about it and make sure that they were okay with that decision, or if they wanted to have some discussion about it.
And I'll just add that I did speak to the FAA about the changes to the building, and I don't anticipate any approval problems for the additional height of the building, so.
Claudia?
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, that was my concern, is if it's 2 stories, is that going to be a problem for any FAA thing? Otherwise, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
change in the
do we
building.
need their blessing or to run it by them or a review?
Yeah, with the committee's approval, I will send the information, the details on the new building elevations, as well as any construction equipment that'll be used for that building, get that off to the FAA so that they can make just reply back to us. I don't anticipate there is any formal paperwork that needs to be submitted other than their concurrence that the existing building will shield the new modified office building.
You're probably concerned with timetable?
Yeah, because it's ready to go. But I talking to Ross, I think that can happen in a couple of days.
You think that the turnaround will be quick enough?
If I don't get it by the end of this week, I'd be surprised.
Okay. Is that good?
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. But does Rich have any idea what he's going to do with it? The second story is going to be offices, light school, office at this point. And it's flexible space, so it could be a lot of things. He thinks that there may be some interest in a tenant, but either way, he wants to go ahead and build, just to have the office space available. I'm fine with it.
Okay, Craig?
The foundation's already in, you said?
Yes.
Yeah. Just like to note that even on private projects, they're subject to change at the last minute, not just public work projects.
Ron?
The number 2 here, is that, did we address that?
For the T-hangars. I did speak to New York State DOT Aviation Bureau about the T-hanger grant application. They have finished their rankings of all the grant applications. They're preparing their packets for executive review. They expect that to be done in 2 or 3 weeks and get that off to the executive branch for their review and approval and announcement of grant awards.
And how much have we applied for?
We applied for 2 rows of T-hangars. That would be a total of 20 units, and the total project cost was roughly $1 million.
And then what kind of revenue does that generate?
The anticipated revenue for that project would be about $80,000, roughly $80,000 a year, depending on the final lease rates that the county would establish for those units.
So, a 10 or 12-year payback.
Well, there's a 10% local match on out of that $1 million, so the county share would be 10% of the $1 million. So with that, it's closer to a 3 to 5 year.
Okay.
Could we step back on the second story addition? Could we have a motion to approve the second story addition by John, seconded by Doug? Any discussion? Just so formally, yeah, okay. Just so formally we have acknowledged that a second story is going on and we approve of it. Peter?
Question in terms of the monthly revenue, and I know it's not terribly significant that the county receives for use of the property at the airport.
So you got the motion in a second.
Footprint had gone horizontally as opposed to vertically. I think we would be entitled to more monthly revenue. I would argue, maybe weekly, that we would be entitled to more revenue going vertically. Okay, are we getting more revenue going vertically?
Peter, because it's a ground lease, you're correct, it's just based upon the footprint, so it doesn't use any more space, so, so it wouldn't, under the lease, it wouldn't affect it.
What if it was a 3-story or a 4-story, okay? Should we be entitled to more revenue? And I would argue that we should be, okay? That we're putting more tenancy at the airport, we're creating more activity, and as a result, maybe should be entitled to more revenue.
I think Rich would argue that, once again, he's making, somewhat of a risky investment to build a building at the airport. Obviously, the restaurant has worked out and the hangars have worked out, but I would just defer to the lease that it's a ground lease.
Thank you.
Peter, part of the argument, I guess, is that the jet hangars are taller than this facility, so height was not an issue when we did a ground lease with the jet hangars, so adding another story, it becomes, as far as the debate goes on that, but I understand what you're saying.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Brian, did you have anything you wanted to add to it?
Square footage, not cubic footage, so.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the second story. Any other discussion? Questions? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Thanks, everybody.
And then also under information for discussion and review, there is the Airport Advisory Group report and referrals. Supervisor Seat.
We did have an airport meeting. We wanted just to convey some different observations they had in a document that was handed out that was very helpful. Thank you, Brian, for working with the working group to get that together, which talked about the differences between the required and optional aspects for the draft RFP. They continue to ask, and rightfully worried about the time frame in terms of getting to review that draft RFP, but look forward to giving that technical advice. Brian did take detailed notes of those suggestions that were made by the group and wanted to make sure it got back to your working group. So hopefully you've seen those comments and we're able to move that along. If it's okay with you, I'd love to ask Travis if I'm missing anything. It's great to have this public-private relationship on this advisory group, and sometimes different members can have different perspectives on it, but is there anything you want to highlight? Is that okay, Chairman?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. I actually like to defer to Mark, who has something to say.
Okay.
I appreciate the ability to talk because I have to go to a conference call. Clients that pay the bills. I did not get a chance to attend the meeting, unfortunately, but I did receive material afterwards. And I wanted to get an update on this RFP that continues to be, it's not forthcoming yet. So I'd like to get an update on that. I think Ross is a member of a New York State Association, Aviation Association of some sort, attends conferences. We pay for those as taxpayers. Seems to me somebody should have an RFP draft that you could get your hands on. Have you secured one from another airport or county, Brian?
Jeremy, want me to?
That's a question.
Your question is,
Have you been
the
able
question
to...
is the RFP that you're looking for to review, if we've secured one from another airport?
Yeah, just see how they have handled the situation, like...
We have conjunctively worked with economic development and Brian, legal department, et cetera, and Wayne Moth is involved, and we're collecting data to present to the committee so that the committee can formulate the RFP in the best form that we know or to move forward.
Yeah.
So to date, economic development and Ed Bartholomew, who's been leading the charge, has been collecting the data. I think he will be calling for a meeting this week to sit down with this committee and start the dialogue as far as this is where we're at, these are options, and this is what you can or can't do, and give me some direction, etc. So he feels that his data collection has been very educational, that it will lend itself to a good dialogue with the committee, so he can get direction, and then we'll proceed from there when we get all the discussions by the committee members as far as what they think that is accomplishable with what we've experienced over the last 10 years, well, 9 years of the option. We feel that the contract is up in 2018, that we're right on track. We wish that we could get a little bit more done this summer, but with vacations and schedules and grant applications, etc., it's put us a bit behind as far as where we would want to be, but we're still very comfortable about where we're at. We don't think this is a complicated venture, and we think what we have to look at will be very understandable in the format they're going to put before the committee.
That, Mr. Chairman, I couldn't agree with more. It's not a complicated venture. So look forward to progress on that front. Thank you for the update. The other topic I'd like to talk about is prevailing wage. In prior situations, the topic has come up before. This is not a new topic. Former county administrator and county attorney Paul Dusick, which this board voted confidence in, has ruled on this in the past. So there's precedent for waiving any prevailing wage provisions out at the airport for prior projects that would involve business services. But regardless of that, if you get on Google and do a 5-minute search, it'll tell you exactly what the rules are. And you just need to make a decision on prevailing wage, one way or the other. Yes?
Could you be more specific on what you're referring to with the prevailing wage?
My understanding at the last meeting, which I did not attend, is that the prevailing wage issue came up as a potential issue brought up by the county attorney.
Well, on the FBO
services,
proposal or contract?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Proposed services like lawn maintenance. I don't know if it applies to janitorial, if that even applies in this situation. I assume there's going to be need to take care of bathrooms and things like that out there by the FBO. It's very clear. I took 5 minutes and got on the New York State labor site and looked at what was prevailing wage and what those wages were for Warren County. So it took like 5 minutes to figure that out. My understanding is there seemed to be an issue here, and I just think that could be cleared up very quickly. Is there an issue with prevailing wage? Or do I have this all wrong? Everybody's looking at me.
Yeah, there is an issue. It's not that clear to me, Mr. Westcott. I've looked at the Department of Labor website many times. I've looked at many cases, and the language is clear. However, the application is less than clear. The Department of Labor is somewhat mercurial with their application of it. They stretch the meaning of the statute to include things that don't appear apparent from a mere reading of the statute. And the problem is, if we say, okay, prevailing wage doesn't apply, and the contractor conducts himself that way, the contractor could get stuck for it after the fact by the Department of Labor, not by us. I just want to make sure that whoever responds to the RFP with a proposal knows the risk and goes into it with eyes wide open and can judge the risk for themselves. I'm just trying to get a straight answer out of the Department of Labor, and that seems to be difficult.
It does seem to be difficult, so I've got a couple of solutions to that. One is Watertown has a very similar deal in place with their RFP, who's mowing their lawns out there. Or not their RFP, their FBO. Their FBO is mowing the lawns. So why don't you just send in a notice to the Department of Labor and ask them if that's prevailing wage or not, and they can rule on that. And then you'll have an answer. And then the other option would be to just make a decision. As people are paid here to make the decision, and then just make it part of the RFP. So that's what I had.
Anything else?
No, that's it. Need to go.
Rachel?
So just to recap from the advisory committee then, they did, as mentioned before, they talked about issues and concerns with training schools and the flight schools as a result, about the mechanics and being able to have air maintenance. And the prevailing wage was definitely a topic of discussion, but I think overall a lot of information that's been gathered and provided and follow-up from Ross in terms of a very old decision regarding the airport and public service here. All of that has been very helpful in just kind of following up on things. So while we aren't seeing a lot of referrals go back and forth, I do think the dialogue is appropriate and useful. So thanks again for keeping those lines of communication open, but hopefully you'll get everything from Brian from that day.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification, I happen to know Watertown is operated by Jefferson County, and Jefferson County operates the FBO and does all the maintenance at the airport. Just
Peter?
for the committees.
Just a quick observation, and Brian's point about prevailing wage and not being a black and white issue, I would 100% concur with him. And the city of Glens Falls, a number of years back, had decided to privatize its public works department. 4 or 5 years, an organization called EarthTech. At the end of the day, the city went back to a traditional DPW structure. But at least 2 employees of the city of Glens Falls got significant settlements. Approaching $1 million. Okay. So the point is, I think we need some definition and some legal opinion, and counsel on both sides of this equation should be in agreement that the issue is in one way, shape, or fashion resolved. Okay, we have a written opinion, so it's not a surprise after the fact. Where at the end of the day, the county ends up ultimately holding the bag on an issue that we didn't indeed address up front. So, Brian, I agree. It's not. I don't think this is quite as simple as one would make it out to be.
Brad?
Dan, why don't we just get the RFP completed and then ask the Department of Labor what their call is going to be? One way or the other, we're going to get an answer, and I'd rather do it that way than expose a vendor to the fact that, you know what, the Department of Labor is going to come in and bang it. So let's get the RFP done. Let's take that and show it to the Department of Labor and say, we don't think this is prevailing rates, and that's what we're going to rule. See what they say.
Okay. Matt?
Ross just said Jefferson County, they're the FBO for the Watertown.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Watertown Airport,
Watertown
the
Airport. They're all-
FBO is owned and operated by Jefferson County.
So they're all county employees?
All
Jefferson
county employees, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Ross?
Nope, that's all I have.
Anything else come before the committee? Claudia?
Thanks, Chairman. I wanted to remind the committee that we have our obligations under the state environmental review for the extension. While FAA is doing their thing, we still need to review the scope that was sent out in March. We have received public comments from Travis Whitehead, Mr. Caffrey, and Dave Gibson. So I just wanted to remind the committee before we approve that draft scope, we need to go over that stuff in committee.
Doug, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I guess Mr. Tenson's going to supply myself and some other supervisors with all correspondence in the last 6 months, although it was pretty tough to get that. At least he's working on that. I look forward to that information hopefully this week. As we all know, that there's been communication in the past. Mr. Caffrey had a foil. It was very enlightening, the communication that was released and the FAA's comments, having, I think, 40 different questions on 40 different issues. And I've been very frustrated in getting any communication at all from that concerning our airport, the FAA, the DEC, CNS Engineering, and this morning Mr. Tenson, like I said, sent me an email saying he will gather up all correspondence in the last 6 months. That's a great starting point, and I look forward to getting that very quickly. Thank you.
Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder to staff that, and I know you're busy with a lot of things right now, including the RFP, but that I think it's, regardless of what happens within the RFP, in terms of future development of the airport, we talked about having an application development process not dissimilar to what many municipalities have, concept, preliminary, final, spells out clearly what information needs to be provided for development purposes at each stage. In this instance, so soon to this committee and work its way up to the ladder, so that everybody's clear on the front end, developer, owner, exactly what information we require at what stage. I'll use as an example, although perhaps adding a second story to a building is not all that significant, and that was the judgment today. But there are changes that are significant, and it's very important that should there be any changes within the process, and that they're evaluated within the process as it relates to parking, pedestrian or other types of circulation systems, snow removal, stormwater, et cetera, et cetera. So I would hope that at some point, in the latter part of this year, I would hope, or at least going into next year, that we can have a draft of something that, clearly lays out the development process at the airport, and what requirements, what's required in each stage of the process. I think it would be a very helpful thing to have.
Yeah. Anything else come before committee? Craig?
Yes, I'd like to follow up on what Chairman Conover brought up there. At this meeting, we were asked to double the size of a building at the airport. If this was in front of a town and this was subject to site plan review, there would be more questions. There would be a process that we would go through and say, well, what is the impact on parking, for example? We know that parking has been a big issue at the airport, and now we have just doubled the size of a building. You could expect that it would also double the size of the required parking. As a committee, we do not have this process in place, and I do think that under pressure of making a quick decision for the sake of a private developer on a publicly owned piece of property, we do not want to be the hindrance to them proceeding, especially if they already have the foundation in the ground, which I am sure has been designed to hold a two-story building. Is that correct?
They looked at it last week, the architect looked at it and said, as a wood frame building, that's fine. It was designed as a one frame building.
Yeah.
There was always going to be a little bit of a second floor area, but this fortunately worked out.
That, and we really do not have adequate time to see how this fits in. Take Mr. McDevitt's, Supervisor McDevitt's comments as well. All of a sudden there is more usable space in a building, yet the ground lease is still the same. And I would think that this committee and Board of Supervisors would have put that into a calculation of a piece of ground is worth X amount in itself, plus an additional if you go up and you get more rentable, usable space out of the deal as well. Just comments that any and all developments of the airport need to have some other type of list that towns would take them through. We are ill-prepared at this point to make sound decisions.
Okay. Travis?
First of all, I think that was a great point that Mr. Lake just made. At any rate, I would like to ask a couple of questions. I have a document in front of me dated January 2017, provided by Bartholomew, who paid for a report from R.A. Weedman Associates, and in it he describes Watertown International Airport, mentions that the responsible agent for airport mowing and snow plowing is the FBO, and it says, there's a note here, it says that the lease states that the FBO provides snow removal and grass cutting. So I don't know, who's correct on this. It might be, very well might be Ross, but then again, we're getting fed information, that it's just the opposite. So these are the kind of things that need to be looked at, and I think what Mr. Leggett says, these should be looked at and maybe take a little time to look at them as well. Getting back to taking time to look at things, I do have a comment on the Runway 30 purchase. That was now going to close at a little over $1.1 million. And if you recall, the whole reason for purchasing that land was that there was a map that was missing that was referenced in a set of easements. The easements were extremely clear that we had every right to go in there and cut down trees, etc. However, it did say that a certain map held by the county and dated in 1944 was what it was referring to, and the county could not produce that map. And we were told at the time that because of that, that easement probably could not be honored. What I find interesting is that we were able to purchase title insurance on land that is defined by that same map. And we paid $1.1 million for that property. I find that very interesting. Now, I had discussions, back in the day with Mr. Offerdew, who said that without the map, he would be not inclined to try to argue that he had any rights to go in there and remove trees, etc., as were explained in great detail in the easements, which we did have a copy of. I find it curious, though, and I have talked with other people, and they say in the case of the purchase, the fact that that map was, referenced by another map and through the years, and then geez, you can make the estimate that that original map is what we're talking about, and yet you couldn't make that for the easement. So, I get a little annoyed when you hear the same argument argued two different ways, and I think we wasted, over $1.1 million in taxpayers' money when we bought that right back in 1944, paid for it back in 1944, but we're not willing to try to exercise it, in 2016. And I think that is a shame. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything to come before the committee? Sir?
Hi, Mike Weil from Queensbury. I just wanted to take a moment to ask a couple of questions and maybe a comment. And it's all related to the airport expansion. I'm wondering if there's any published document or the like that kind of states all the expenses that we've had to date. And the reason why I ask is in some circles this is somewhat of a controversial project. And in my sense, many of these expenses are at risk because there's an EPA review, there's an FAA review, and I was just wondering if we had a total of all the investments that we've made, not with grants, but our payments to do all the work that we've had to do so far. Is there anything like that that's available to the public?
We can certainly pull that information together for you. If you want to give me your contact information after the meeting, I will forward that information.
Thanks, Ross. But that's not something that's been presented to the committee or anything like that prior?
We have presented that information in the past, the total cost of the project environmental phase of this project.
Just the environmental phase, or is this everything?
That's all we've spent local share on to date is the environmental phase of the project. We have not got a grant yet for any of the design work.
Okay.
Just preliminary engineering.
And now, if I think of this as an at-risk investment, because there's still some approvals that need to be made, are any of these expenses negated or reimbursable if the project doesn't go through? I don't know if we've done any land lease acquisitions when we're talking about the land lease. My first thought was if it's related to the expansion, if the expansion doesn't improve, do we get the ability to cancel that contract? So it's just a question along those lines because it is at risk. Are we doing anything that kind of gives us a chance to get our money back? And I will reach out to you, Ross. Thanks.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything come before the committee? Motion to adjourn? Matt? Second by Ron. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
We require so many spaces per